You're odd with wrong pen. Okay.
Right.
First of all, I was doing comics, as you all know, of course.
Why?
Why was I doing comics? Well, comics with me, manga and all of that stuff, it was heavily influenced on my younger life, and it was a form of escapism which I researched and put into my research, but I can't print off the, what's it called? My project basically, so I'll just explain that to y'all. First of all, I did I started off making my comics through the Marvel way, which was to create the images and then add the story on later. Because I found making the story to be really easy, like writing's what I'm most proficient in. So started off with comic book language, the different forms of onomatopoeia that you see inside comics with the different speech bubbles, exclamation marks, thought processes, dashes when you see speed, stars when you see somebody being knocked out. Yeah, then I started to move on to ideas that I had for creating my comic. So I knew that somewhere I wanted to touch on knife crime because that was largely in America and down in UK. So I knew that I wanted to put that in there. So I started off with drawing a hand and a knife, and I knew that I was going to combine the two somehow. I was going to do some running people. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. But I decided to make my story to be a pilot because when most comic books start out, they don't really show you the whole entire story. They just want you to get hooked on the first and then you continue buying the rest. So I shortened my story, and when I shortened my story, I found out that the running scene would have been necessary. So yeah, I didn't continue with that. I started to do character development with my character. I wanted him to be anonymous and kind of unknown, so I wanted him to be underneath a hood. I looked at different characters that have done this before, and no comic book really focuses on that. There are comic book characters that have them in hooded jackets, but their hood never comes up. So I wanted to add something different, so I started basing it on that. I used patterns from Japanese, what should I say, art to influence some of the things that I do. What else? Then I started to do a comic example. It was an initial sketch because the initial idea with drawing a comic is first you do the sketches, then the inking, then the coloring, and so forth. So I did a sketch of how I wanted the page to kind of look, and then I went on from there on to looking at different characters, people, techniques, inking, drawing, and sketches from comic books. So I wanted to like I said, I wanted my character to be in a hood, and I wanted it to have a anime kind of style. As I said, anime was a large part of my youth. So I looked at some anime characters that were hooded. I looked at some real life people that were hooded to get a real life form or sense of form. And I looked at what is the most known superhero today, which is Superman, to get a sense of dynamic. I looked at facial expressions because in the previous project I noticed that facial expressions in the character's book were rather important. I looked at line art and high contrast in images to really just get high contrast, to be honest. This brainstorm or thought process was the ideas of behind creating a comic book. What's that? It talks about the initial stages of sketching, then using inking, then putting on my drawn script, and all the script that I added on was my own handwriting from it. The genre, why I chose the genre, the meaning behind it, yeah, all that good stuff. Behind here was some ideas of comic books from different genres. So we have manga here from, what's it called? Akira, I think it's Akira. Which is one of the most well, it was revolutionary in the sense of anime because of the creator who created it, and Hang touched on him inside her presentation. And we have some other genres here, like crime and mystery and drama. Here is my story, which all of you have a copy of. Then I went on to development. I started to use photos of myself in the characters. I wanted it to have a more home-like feel because I started running out of faces to do for the character. So I used my own and edited it in a couple of ways or so for first-hand research. Then I started to change the technique that I used to drawing. As before, I was using just a felt tip and sketching behind it, so I wanted more different lines, so I started to use more fine liners and different sizes and hashing instead the artwork to show contrast instead of just using plain art inking, because I noticed that's what they do in comics as well. I chose that as the final way how my character would look, and yeah, I was happy with that final outcome. Here's some development on the computer as to how I did it. So first the inking and sketching, and then I added in the color and added in textures after that, and added in a more thicker outline because that's what most comics use. And with this, I use these books as inspiration to draw these characters. I wanted to get a character development from another point of view, from a different artist, from a completely different genre of books. I had my first page for the comic as a test run. I use photos and I edited them on Photoshop. I colored in my character and his final designs, and then I placed them in. And yeah, and I wanted, because one of the comic book artists that I was looking at was basically the creator of the Dark Knight and the series, and he was responsible for revisiting the Dark Knight series and making it live. That spawned 2 movies, and his art style was kind of dark and gritty, and I really liked that, so I used black and white and then used the characters to make them stand out as he did. Here is some test runs for using photos inside actual comic book situations. I added in the yellow borders, as comics do, to, like, when words are behind a yellow box is not actually part of what the characters are saying, but is actually a way of telling you what's going on inside the story. And the white was telling you what she's saying or whatever the character is saying. I used different backgrounds for different situations, either photo or ones that make you primarily focus on the characters. And yeah, that's it. Just a little sketch. And this, on the other hand, was a preliminary, like the start, what I wanted the comic to end up looking like. And these were some pages of a comic that I had when I was younger, which I kind of referred to when I went back in my comic. But yeah, that's it.
Okay. Is that the final comic?
No.
And
that's just a print.
Okay.
I can't print off the final, is it?
You can't. Yeah. Now the printer is working apparently, so you can print it later.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Has anybody got any question?
What's the name of the comic? What's the name of the comic?
I wanted to be called Unknown, and I used a form inside the text that was a first for me to ellipse text. I don't know what you call it, but it makes it curve and form around the character.
Is that the cover, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's called Unknown. It relates to the story.
Do you know, like, if you were looking at a company that was producing comic books, like, all the different roles would be, like, what the sort of time scale they would have to design it?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's more than just one that works on the comic. That's why it was so hard to keep to a 4-week timetable with this one. Normally, inside a comic book studio, you would have one person dedicated for sketching, one person dedicated for colouring, toning, stories, implementing stories, the cover. you have your director, you have your head of board, you have all of that stuff. Yeah, and it was harder to do that with just one person.
Can you, you know what you just said about the team involved into a book? Can you add that onto your book? I think that's missing because you're very
I was meant to add the picture that I
yeah,
took, yeah.
it's very diverse and you know what you're talking about, but it's missing in that book. Yeah, I think your presentation was fine. There was enough information. What do you think? Okay, good. Thank you.